Beatrice B. Rivers waited on the bench outside East Savannah Trust with the late sun burning the rim of her silver hair. Her dress was faded blue cotton, the hem smudged with dust. Her sandals were wired together at the toes. In her lap lay a dented envelope and a government benefits card, the thin lifeline between her and the hospital bed her little girl, Lila, needed. Inside the bank the air smelled of polish and indifferent order. Shiny shoes and clipped voices moved along marble counters. Bea took a breath and stepped across the threshold. Her voice was small and steady. "Good evening. I need help withdrawing my pension. My daughter is sick." A teller glanced at the card, then at Bea's worn hands. The tilt of the teller's smile hardened. "Is this yours?" the teller asked with an undertone of suspicion. Someone murmured in the queue. The security guard's eyes narrowed. The branch manager, Marcus Vale. Navy suit, salt and pepper hair, a posture practiced to protect the bank's image, hovered with the precision of policy. "You can't loiter here," Marcus said, the words clipped and clinical. "Sit outside. You smell like dirt." The room fell into a soft, hateful silence. Laughter tinkled from the corner like broken glass. No one moved to help. Bea set the envelope and card on the counter, fingers trembling. As the confrontation continued and people recorded, the teller pushed the envelope back toward her. Bea picked it up, thanked no one, and left. At the end of the line, a woman moved. Ray Vale, in her early 30s and wearing a simple off-white linen dress, lowered herself into a small, deliberate bow toward Bea, an ordinary, human motion of respect that cut across the bank's polished protocols. One by one, others copied her, a man with groceries, a young mother, a man in business casual. The queue bowed like falling dominoes. Phones rose. Someone recorded the scene. A 2-minute clip traveled farther than any single voice could, and by midnight it ricocheted across the city's feeds. An elderly black woman shamed in a bank, a daughter clinging to life, strangers bending in reverence. Comments burst into flame, rage, sorrow, praise. The bank's inbox swelled. Marcus's phone buzzed until the edges of his composure frayed. Bea returned home with the envelope's weight in her bag and a tighter knot in her chest. Lila lay pale and fevered on a cot. Bea pressed a cool cloth to the child's forehead and promised, as mothers and teachers promise, that she would find a way. She had taught children for decades. She had found Lila years ago, abandoned at a bus terminal, and raised the child as her own. That quiet devotion now collided with bureaucracy and the blunt arithmetic of hospital admissions. Natalie Ramirez watched the viral clip on a late-night scroll. She was a woman used to turning resources into outcomes, data, dollars, logistics. The child's small face did not reduce to an algorithm. Natalie messaged a hospital contact, "Cover her." Now, the wire transfer arrived, anonymous and immediate. St. Agnes moved Lila into observation, ordered tests, and prepared for the invasive steps that might be needed. The presence of funds opened doors and accelerated action in a world where time sometimes means life. The city's social currents turned quickly. Marcus was called before head office. PR drafted statements. Viewers demanded consequences. Marcus, who had once kept a photograph, years old, edges creased, of a rainy station and a sprawled bundle of baby blankets, felt memory shift under his feet. A past he had tried to tuck away pushed at him. A frantic night years before when a woman fleeing danger had lost a child in the crowd. He had been young then, running the same streets, terrified and not seeing what he might later seek to explain away. At the hospital, tests came back grim enough to make clinicians move with sharper urgency. Lila's blood work suggested a severe malignancy. The word leukemia entered the room like winter. Bea clung to the hope of treatment. Doctors spoke in necessary candor. Immediate workups, imaging, a possible bone marrow aspiration. Without prompt intervention, the risk increased. The anonymous donor's funds allowed the team to proceed without delay. Ray visited the ward with cheeks still wet from something between shame and compassion. She had not posted the viral clip. She had not sought attention. When she saw Bea's hands, the calluses of a lifetime of washing and teaching, something in her softened beyond the performative. Ray reached out and took Bea's palm. "I'm the one who bowed," she said, voice small. "I'm sorry." Bea accepted the apology without ceremony. "Words can hurt," she said, "but what we do after them matters most." The exchange was not a resolution. It was the beginning of a new account. Tests and treatment began. Lila endured needles and medications. She learned the strange rhythms of hospital days. Pale walls, the murmur of machine alarms, the kindness of a nurse who braided her hair back gently. There were moments of laughter, brief, and precious. A story recited by B. A bowl of soup sipped like medicine of a different order. There were moments of terror, when monitors climbed and doctors' faces tightened. Marcus stepped into a private reckoning. He had been brand and policy, but standing outside the pediatric unit, he understood the human cost of those policies. The photograph he kept, yellowed now, depicted a small crescent mark between a baby's thumb and forefinger, a unique birthmark he had never named aloud. He noticed, now in the bedside light, that Lila had the same faint circle. The world folded into itself like two maps overlaid. The lost child he had never found, the child in front of him who might be his. Words tumbled out in a way that felt at once late and honest. I lost a child years ago, Marcus admitted, voice raw. I thought I had no right to claim him. B looked at him and saw not a caricature of malice, but a man confronted by his own unexamined history. You're hurting now, she said. People can change. It's what they do next that matters. Change, in this story, would be slow and not without cost. Lila's condition worsened despite the best efforts. The team fought with the blunt tools of medicine and the small miracles of care, but the cruelty of some illnesses is that they test the very limits of human will. One night, the monitor's steady beep faltered. The room filled with the tautness of people trying to coax fate. When the doctor pronounced the time of death, a long, collective breath left the room. B held Lila and told her things a mother says quietly into the ear of a child who has given everything. That she had been loved, that she had been chosen, that the world was richer for having her in it. Ray wept. Marcus stood with his head bowed. Natalie left a folded note in B.A.'s hand. No name, just a promise that the funds would continue, that Lila's care and a memorial would be honored. Public sorrow shifted into a practical grief. Outrage did not end at snide comments. It moved into action. Donations poured in. People who had only watched a viral clip brought casseroles, knitted hats, and offers of legal aid and counseling. Heads of corporations sent statements. But more importantly, activists and civic leaders demanded structural change. The bank suspended staff and faced an investigation. Marcus resigned from his post and began, awkwardly and humbly, to give time and money to repair what words had broken. Ray took up community work, organizing literacy circles and visiting neighborhood clinics. Natalie formalized the anonymous giving into a foundation, Harbor Hands, meant to support guardians like B with emergency medical funds, stipends, and legal assistance. Months multiplied like small acts of repair. Harbor Hands sponsored emergency grants for foster guardians, set up a rapid response medical fund, and backed neighborhood programs that stitched dignity into local systems. Marcus redirected personal resources into the new fund. Ray's humility became a steady practice. B returned to teaching in community rooms, her voice steady, telling children stories and reading the alphabet the way one breathes an enduring spell. She taught care as a craft. Lila's photograph, taken in a hospital room where she had smiled with the thin strength of someone who loved strawberries, hung at the foundation's inaugural event. People gathered not for spectacle, but to make the work durable. B spoke with a tenderness that made the room lean in. I didn't set out to be a hero, she said. I promised a child I would keep her safe. We learned to do better for the next ones. The city changed in small, teachable increments. Bank policies were revised. Staff were trained in dignity-first interactions. Community liaisons closed the gap that had once yawned between institution and person. Harbor Hands opened offices with phones that answered in the night, offering small checks and legal counsel. The bench outside East Savannah Trust remained, now often occupied by people who lingered without fear. On some afternoons, passers-by paused and bowed, not as a performative act, but as a quiet, habitual respect. Grief did not vanish. B kept a hollow that softened but did not close. She lit candles for Lila and taught with the same stubborn patience as ever. Marcus learned to sit with accountability rather than flee from it. Ray found her life remade into action. Natalie returned to her spreadsheets with a different measure of success, one that included lives changed rather than only margins widened. In time, Harbor Hands expanded beyond its first neighborhood. Small networks of care sprouted in other towns. The story that had begun with a humiliation and a bowed head had morphed into a movement to see people before policy. It was not the tidy moral of a fable. It was the messy, hard work of repair. B aged into a quiet kind of legend in the neighborhoods she served, an ordinary woman whose love catalyzed a city to look again. She would sometimes sit on the same bench and watch children play, a photograph of Lila in her hand. We made a harbor, she would whisper to the wind and the city. Little by little, imperfect and human, learned to keep its doors open a little wider.